Hi everyone. So just continuing on from the last episode, what I've got to do now is sort of even out the rust converter spots and then polish the frame from there. So I'll just be going over some of the spots, really just to make sure it's a bit of an even transition into the rust converter. So the edges will get sort of scuffed up a little bit with that same synthetic wool again. And then I'll go over with a mild polishing compound just to sort of get rid of some of these scratch marks. Of course, you can just leave it matte. It's up to you really, but I wanted it to be sort of close to the original finish, which is a gloss black. So I'd like to get rid of these scuff marks. Just going to go over it quickly just to sort of even out that rust converter. You can see this is the rusted part. You can sort of see the chip. Might be hard to see on camera with the light. So that's the chip there. That's all rust converted. Then this is the rust converter over the paint, so it doesn't do anything. So why I'm going over it now again with the finishing pad is just to smooth off those parts, just to make it sort of blend in a little bit more. You can also chip it off. I normally do that if it goes over decals or if it's on like a bit of an open spot on the frame. Otherwise I just use that scotch pad, and then once I've gone over all of the patches that I've scotched up, I will just use some mild polishing compound. This is really just a cream polish. It's nothing too abrasive, but it does have sort of fine particles in it, so it leaves quite a nice gloss finish, but it doesn't do any further damage. So I didn't record all of the wheel building process, but you get to see a little bit of what I do. So to clean the hubs up, I first used this, it's basically like a Jif or a cleaning compound. It's called Barkeeper's Friend, and it's the soft cleanser, so it's like a premix. And then just wiping it all off, and then afterwards I go over it with Autosol. And I did use a wool cone attachment for a drill with the Autosol. This is just a bit of wheel building prep, so I'm just using some grease in the nipples. Just make sure they don't seize up. I know some people do use thread lock, but that's really unnecessary because the torque that you apply and the tension from the spokes, it keeps the nipples from backing out. So I just briefly skip over the wheel building process. There are heaps of videos online that you can check out. So wheel building, it's kind of an intimidating thing to do for the first time, but once you've done it once or twice, you realize that it's really not that difficult. The most complicated thing is measuring for the spokes, but there's a bunch of wheel calculators out there now, so you can just use those, punch in all your numbers, and bang. I'm glad I double checked this because actually one of the cone nuts on the rear hub was damaged, but it was only in one tiny little spot. But I just pulled one out of my parts bin, and that makes up like one of the 3 parts that I actually had to use out of my parts bin. So I tried throughout this whole build to not just use things from my parts bin. I wanted to use as many of the original parts as I could, and I think I did a pretty good job. Most of the parts cleaned up really nicely. At the end of this video, I'll put a few clips sort of comparing the before and after. So I'm pretty happy with the condition of all the parts. They definitely need a clean and polish up, but the only thing that's a bit of a questionable thing at the moment is I don't know if the chain rings are going to take a new chain. So I've been surprised by them before. Chain rings that have looked like they'll take a new chain, sometimes they don't. It's the same thing with the cassette. It's a bit of a gamble really. You can just get new chain rings and new cassettes, but that's quite an expensive venture if you replace all the chain rings. Cassette, not so much. As you can see, this pedal has a bit of a bend to the outer cage. I think that should bend back. So I do still have to clean up some of the parts like the jockey wheels, the headset bearings, and then I'll go over and polish some of the things like the cranks. The brakes will get a bit of polish up, and then the alloy on the derailleurs. Probably the pedals too, just because it would look a little bit funny if I touch up the paint and then leave these all scungy. So this shifter seems to be working pretty well now. I've just put some silicone grease on everything. This shifter, however, it seems to be a little bit finicky. I've tried sort of rescuing it. It works some of the time. So I'll keep trying to mess with this. Hopefully I can get that to work through both gears. So the alloy components, I'm really just giving a quick polish up. So I start by cleaning off any surface debris with just some soapy water and a rag. And then I go over with the Scotch pad, which is a fine Scotch pad. So I think it equates to a 00 steel wool. I could be wrong. And then after the Scotch pad, I go over with some Autosol. I do this by hand just to sort of show you how it can come up. So you don't need power tools. I know some people use Dremels and stuff. You don't really need it. It does come up a lot better and a lot quicker, but it's not entirely necessary. And then I just go over most of the other components. So the pedals, I just do it by hand before sanding up the outer cages. I do the stem at the same time because I'm doing them both matte black, but I don't show all of the stem being done. So to keep the budget down, I used the ugliest stem I had. So this one, it'll fit nicely. It sort of suits the whole style of the bike, and I can just throw some paint at it. I did also use some rust converter on it, just because it had a little bit of mild surface rust, but it was in a lot better condition than the original stem. So this is the drill attachment that I use. So that's me just cleaning up the surface of it first, and then dabbing on some Autosol, and then cleaning up this brake. So bench mounted polishing wheels are also pretty popular. I find them only really useful for the larger items. They don't really get into the finicky little spots that show up in pretty much every component, so I tend to not use it that often. I normally just use the drill attachment, and that works great for pretty much everything. And as you can see, it polishes up pretty nicely. So this didn't take too long. I would normally go over the lettering as well, but I decided not to this time. Oh, and real quick, I've sold this on to someone. I saw somebody was looking for Avanti parts for an old Diamondback of theirs, and I offered this to them and they wanted it. So I have a few dollars going back into the budget, but I've already bought everything, so yeah. $15. So instead, I'm just going to use this black one on the Avanti. Or maybe a silver one. I haven't decided yet. Yeah, maybe silver. So a little update, this is the left-hand shifter. I've got it going up through all the gears now, but it won't go down. So it looks like this little roller here is just not releasing properly. So you can see it gets stuck. So it's supposed to just sort of just flop around a bit. Once you free that though, it goes. It'll hopefully get there, we'll see. I've got some penetrating oil on there, hopefully that sort of loosens out some of the gunk and stuff that's probably stuck on the shaft. Otherwise I can just disassemble the shifter and then clean everything and put it back together, and that should solve it. I just heard it click, so I think, yeah, it made itself over. Hey! It's going through all the gears now. Very slowly. We'll see. Now, I would normally just recommend getting new brake pads, especially if you can afford some cool stop pads, but in a pinch, this does work. It definitely won't make them work like new pads will, but it'll give them a bit of life and it'll make the bike roll and stop again. So it's kind of a way to get around buying new pads if you don't have the time or anything. I wouldn't put this on a customer's bike, but it's fine for me. I'll just take it a bit easy. Last thing before I start throwing everything together, just had to grab one of these out of the parts bin for the rear derailleur. So with the wheels built up and everything cleaned and polished, it was time to rebuild all the components. Everything went pretty smoothly. Yeah, the only thing I had to replace was that barrel adjuster for the rear derailleur. I did forget to soak the straddle cables, or I don't know what you call them, because they're like the half straddle cables for cantilever brakes. I forgot to soak those in Evaporust, so they look a little bit scungy. Well, just the bolts in them, I forgot to take those out. So there's like a little bolt and nut, and also half of it is steel. The other half is alloy, so you'll see it a bit later on. So repacking the pedals, it's pretty simple. The only thing that I don't really like about it is because the bearings are so small, it's kind of fiddly, especially with the outer cage that isn't removable. So you have to sort of reach in there. Then I end up using a scribe to sort of push the bearings in place. If I had more time, I probably would have gone over these pedals again. The paintwork wasn't perfect. The stem looks a lot nicer, but this was the last day of the month for the challenge, so I just wanted to get it all done. So perfection wasn't really, I just didn't have the time to make everything perfect. But everything came up a whole lot tidier than what it was, so I started to move on to the assembly of it. So it's not really my style. I normally like to show pretty much all of the reassembly, but in this video I sort of wanted to save a bit of time so I don't show the whole reassembly of the bike. It saved me a lot of time when filming it because this was the last day, so I was in a bit of a rush. I fell down the little nub. It can go to hell. And it also keeps the entire length of the video down, so you don't have 40 minutes of me cleaning stuff up, rebuilding the bike, and then a bit of riding footage afterwards. So there'll be a timeline in the description, so it should show up with timestamps in the video. If you want to click forward and just see the end result, then by all means go ahead. This drive side bottom bracket cup didn't really torque up properly. Going smoothly so far. So I actually took this bike to get my first jab of the vaccination, and it seemed to ride really nicely. There were a couple of issues with it. The front brake needed adjusting, it wasn't equal to the rear brake, so the lever feel was a little bit different, and the straddle cable, or the half straddle cable, whatever you call it, came loose. So it still felt fine, but it just came sort of out of adjustment. And the seat post, I didn't initially tighten it up hard enough, so over time it dropped a couple of inches. I didn't actually notice until I was almost home, and I thought, this seat feels a little bit too low. It shifted gears fine. The cheap tyres were actually pretty good. I was pretty impressed with those. Overall, it was quite a nice handling bike as well. There were a few things that I'd like to change. Yeah, the brakes need adjusting, and then probably the handlebar ends I need to change as well. Just they didn't fit quite as nicely as I'd like. But overall, it was a fun bike. I had a really nice ride on it. It took a bit of a detour on the way back that went through some gravel and a bit of a park, so there was sort of some off-road action. The tyres, yeah, they went okay. I didn't actually lose too much grip like I thought I would on some of the tree routes. Definitely not the best tyres, but I mean, for $10 they're great. And it was also pretty fun using Zoom Brahma bars again. I hadn't used them in a while, but that was pretty fun. wheel spin. So as a bit of a recap, if I had to do everything again, I probably would do it about the same. I'm glad that I found a Kiwi bike to do it with. It would be nice if I found something with horizontal dropouts, and then I would have built up a single speed bike, but because it had vertical ones, I decided just to try and keep the gears on it. I could have done like a 1x setup as well, although it probably would have just been a 7-speed 1x. But I decided to keep it pretty original, just do like a restoration more than anything. It sounds like a few of the people local here within Auckland are interested in doing a cheap bike challenge here. So it looks like I'll have something similar in the future. Obviously it will have to be when we're out of lockdown, and it will be open to sort of old 10 speeds, old road bikes and stuff as well. So I could build something sort of gravel-ish, sort of like a Franken bike, for lack of a better term. Hopefully something a little bit more custom. It just depends on how much of the budget I have left over. So here's some clips from it before and after. You can see the comparison. That's about all I have for today. Thanks for checking out the video. There'll be some road bike footage coming up soon, so I hope you enjoy that. So huge thanks to Mark, who is Monkey Shred. Check him out on YouTube. I had heaps of fun building this bike up. So thanks heaps, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye. So this happened a day after filming. It seems like the alloy cup on the drive side just wanted to go up. So it was pretty annoying finding it. But as it turns out, it's not really the worst thing in the world, because the bottom bracket tool actually still grabs in there pretty nicely. So it's just going to stay like this for a while until I grab another bottom bracket. So not a huge loss really. It was pretty annoying finding it, but yeah. Oh well. Did I even turn the light on?